Welcome everyone to Sister Wives with Mary Jane K. Today, I'll be putting out my next episode of Sister Wives early, Season 1, Episode 5, First Wife's 20th Anniversary. The episode opens with Mary, who explains that Christine has had Truly and Cody is now formally engaged to Robin. It's Cody and Mary's 20th wedding anniversary. The day doesn't start with the two lovebirds in bed being present, spending quality time together. It starts with Mary accompanying her sister wives, Christine and Janelle, to the jewelry store to purchase a claddagh ring for Robin for when she gets married. Mary explains that the claddagh ring is a traditional Irish wedding band and it's become a Brown family symbol. Mary says the wives all have their own wedding rings from Cody, but the claddagh ring is a ring that all the sister wives have, so they want to include Robin. Janelle, the practical and financially minded wife, wants to talk about the budget. Janelle says for her, when picking out Robin's claddagh ring, price was her main deciding factor in picking the ring. Janelle says it never seems like there's enough money to meet the family's needs, but they do okay. Christine explains there was one ring that was the least expensive choice and it had more detail than the other rings. Mary says, how do you even say that it should have cost more so it means more? It doesn't make sense. Mary explains that Robin will get her claddagh ring at the wedding reception. She thinks Robin will think it's really cool, but she's nervous about if they pick the right ring for Robin. The sales lady asks if it's for Robin's birthday or just because, and Mary answers just because. Janelle explains that when somebody starts digging about who they are and what their relationship is, she's evolved in it. She used to think, what do I tell them, and get all deer in the headlights about it? But it's easier now to just say sisters because it shuts down the conversation. If they say they are sister wives, that automatically, if they understand that terminology, which most people do in Utah, then it brings with it all the prejudice and everything comes into the interaction. So it's easier to just be vague about it. Janelle asks, what does it matter? What do they care regarding the inquisitive people they encounter who ask them questions about what their relationships are to each other? She says they're almost always asking because they think something is up. Robin is at her new rental, a block from the Browns' one big house, paid for by, I'm guessing, Janelle and Cody mostly. I don't think at this time Christine worked. Mary worked some with at-risk youth. But who provided the lion's share of Robin's rental payment? I'm guessing, and it's just speculation, purely speculation on my part. This is just speculation and opinion, but I'd say Janelle and Cody. Robin worked as a single mom before she married Cody. Then she moved into the rental, and she doesn't work anymore at this point when she moves into the rental other than the filming. And Cody and his other wives already are spread so thin financially with so many family members and so many mouths to feed. And now they're paying for Robin's living and for her new rental house and her food and all her bills and for her kids. And Robin accepts it. I would never feel comfortable accepting that at all. I'd insist on finding work so that I'm not taking away from the other wives and the other kids' needs. I think it shows Robin's character to accept this. She's accepting a rental funded by the Browns, all her food, all her bills, all her kids' stuff, all paid for by them. If they want to help Robin some, then fine. But why is Robin not trying to contribute financially to her own rent or bills or food or kids? She says she loves these other women, that she wants the family. Okay, how can she accept a rental fully funded by basically, I'm guessing, Janelle and Cody most likely, and not attempt to work herself to pay as much as she can, knowing that it takes financially from the wives and from Cody's other kids' budgets? Robin is looking at photos and she says they are all settling into life. They've been in the new rental a few weeks and it's been interesting trying to find her place with Janelle and Christine and Mary. She's a fiancée now formally, so maybe she expects more clout with them. Robin says it's like, so where's my place here? Did they forget the red carpet and the step and repeat for Robin's arrival as fiancée? What an ego. Rather than have patience and allow the other wives and kids to adjust to the shifting sands beneath their feet with their move and arrival, it's all about Robin. She wants a place. She wants more established clout and a role immediately within the family. It's all about her. These women and Cody and his kids have been an established family for 20 plus years. Christine just had Truly. It's Mary's anniversary, 20th anniversary. She just moved and became a fiancé. Everything is also changing for the Browns as she will come into the family. And Robin can't be patient and give time or consider their struggles. It's all about her wanting to know her place. The wives have suffered greatly for Robin's entrance into the family. She gets different standards than them, and now she's saying it's interesting finding her place with the wives, all about her rather than being understanding and having empathy and allowing the wives to adjust first. It's all about Robin. Instead of Sister Wives, maybe they should call the show All About Robin. Robin asks next, where do I fit? Now she is showing one of her young daughters, Brianna, who looks about 5 years old maybe, a photo of Cody with all his wives and Robin, and she points to Mary and asks, who is this? Her daughter says, it's Mom. And Robin asks, Mommy who? Her daughter answers, Mary. Next, Robin points to Cody and asks, who is this? And Brianna answers, Cody. Then Robin asks, who? And Robin's daughter, Brianna, changes her answer from Cody to Daddy. Most likely because she knew her mom expected it, and after she called Cody by name and her mom asked who after that answer, she may have felt Cody is the wrong answer. She has to call him Daddy, and her mom wants that response. If Brianna saw Cody as Daddy and wanted to call him that, it would have been her first answer to who is that when Robin pointed to his picture. Kids are honest and upfront, and in my opinion, she answered Cody because to her that was Cody, not Daddy. And upon her mom questioning further who, she then answered Daddy. I feel as though she wants to direct her young kids to identify Cody as Daddy and the other wives as Mommy, when that should be something they decide to do on their own when they are ready, if they are ever ready to do that. I really don't find this appropriate. These kids have only known monogamy, and I feel like Robin is pushing the kids to give the wives and Cody titles, and the kids aren't giving them out of respect and love and out of their own want from themselves because it's natural to them. In my opinion, it's because Robin is coaching them and coaxing them with the photos, and it's very, very, very odd and bizarre and strange. In my opinion, she should let her kids decide on their own who to call what and who means what to them. They have a mom and a biological dad, and if they build relationships that warrant titles of mom and dad, and they want to give those titles naturally of themselves, fine. But in my opinion, this is weird and manipulative. It's the same as a single mom bringing a man and instructing her kids to call him Daddy, whether they have built that relationship with that man as a father-child relationship, and whether they have bonded to him or not. Titles of mom and dad should come from the child, in my opinion, once the relationship is built with that step parent, if and only if they choose to do so. It should not be coaxed or taught or pushed or forced. That's very odd to me. Robin is showing Brianna another photo of the wives and Cody staring at an empty chessboard with no pieces. It's a black and white photo, totally staged. Robin is seated across from Cody, and Christine is seated in the middle on one side, looking pensively at the board, as Mary stands above, hunched over, pondering intensely, and Janelle stands near Cody, pointing at the board and smiling at the blank chessboard. It looks completely unnatural. I don't think it's cute. Robin explains there are no chess pieces in the photo because they all get pretty serious about what's there, and sometimes there's nothing to worry about. I'm guessing by what's there, she means the struggles in each separate relationship with Cody and the dynamics between the wives and the larger family and the hierarchy within that. But I can't be sure what she means. Robin isn't very articulate. I'm sure there's nothing to worry about for her. She doesn't have to work. She gets a rental paid for by basically Janelle and Cody, I'm speculating, while all the other wives and kids have to get a little bit less and sacrifice to make that work. She knows she gets different standards and treatment than the other wives for her courtship, and she also knows that she is the favorite who has Cody totally pussy whipped, and he is very vocal that she's the soulmate, the love of his life, and she's also very vocal about Cody being her soulmate. She knows she's the newest, so yes, for her, there's nothing to worry about. But not for the other wives who feel the floor dropping out from underneath their feet because of her entrance into their family and their status quo that they've had for 20 plus years. Cody and Mary are having a talk with their daughter Mariah at the big house. Mariah talks with Cody about school. Mariah wants to go back to her old school. She's 14 at the time that they have filmed this, and the Browns have sent their kids to public school rather than their private church's school, and Mariah hates public school. Cody says he needs a good reason why Mariah should return to her old school. He wants to know how public school is different than private school. Mariah says she hates public school and she hates the people there. Cody says it's not a good reason, and Mariah says, yes, it is. Cody says he hated being a teenager sometimes, but he still had to be one. He seems like the type of kid that would get bullied a lot, and this is pure speculation on my part. Pure speculation. And he wanted to probably be accepted a lot, perhaps. And I feel that because of how he follows Ken around, even though Ken is completely disrespectful, and this is just speculation, that maybe Cody wasn't accepted as a teenager and as a younger kid at school. And so he developed this ego-driven, narcissistic personality as a defense mechanism, and he has his 4 wives that he wants to lead, and he wants respect and obedience all the time as some type of defense mechanism to make up for his past. I don't know. This is just pure speculation and just my opinion on my part. I think that it's possible that Mariah gets made fun of in school, or maybe she doesn't fit in, maybe she doesn't feel safe in public school, and maybe it creates anxiety for her. And if she is accepted and she likes the private school at this time in her life, maybe Cody should just have coughed up the money and allowed it. And maybe she shouldn't even have gone to public school in the first place. Also, switching kids from private to public school while they have gone public with this lifestyle is cruel, because kids are very cruel, and these kids need everything that they know, some stability. They need their friends. They need the same support system. So switching school and what they know amidst a TV show and a new wife coming in is really insensitive to them. I wonder if the money and the financial aspect of sending all the kids to this church private school, when they now have to afford and absorb a jobless, in-debt Robin and her kids and a whole separate rental house and bills, was a factor in putting all the Brown kids in public school to save to provide for Robin. If that's the case, that's really unfair to the Brown kids. I'm sure some of them love public school and some of them might prefer the private church school. Mariah does have a slight attitude with Cody, but she's 14, and I believe kids should always have some type of choice. If they want to do public school and they like it, great. If they are forced to try it and change their whole social world, which is school, to a child, and they are uncomfortable or bullied or made fun of, or they just don't like it for any type of reason, it can cause a lot of trauma to them that can affect them later on in life. So it's really important to listen to your kids and give them a choice, so when they grow up, they have many less issues to deal with. And Cody does allow Mariah to choose, and I do want to give him credit for that. Mary reminds Mariah to be respectful of Cody, and she does have a slight tone, but so far she hasn't been anything close to disrespectful, in my opinion. If Cody can't pay for her private school because of Robin's rental, that's incredibly unfair, and I'm just speculating. I don't know why he explains that he put the kids in the public school because the public school is accredited while their church school isn't accredited. Cody explains that the private school is a polygamous school, not a real private school. It's an organization of homeschool coalition. It's not accredited, and so people who have done the private school had to go get GEDs. And Cody, I give him credit. He says it's Mariah's choice. And I'm really impressed that Cody is giving her a choice. If that's where she's comfortable at this time in her life with all this change around her, I think if she wants to get the GED and it's not going to affect her future, then that's fine. My main concern would be my child having their friends and support system, especially during this stressful time with so many changes in their lives. I just wonder, did he have the kids go to public school to avoid the fees for the private polygamous school to help pay financially for absorbing Robin into the family? Or is it just because of the accreditation and that they will have to go get the GEDs? I still want to know. In my opinion, I tell my kids, go where you're most comfortable, but if it's the polygamous school, you're going to have to get your GED as an equivalent to a high school diploma that you would get in public school. And if you need to further your education, it might affect that, but it's your choice. Maybe she chose to try public school. Maybe she wasn't given a choice. I really don't know. Mariah asks Cody, do you remember that I wanted to join the military? And Cody asks, well, that was when you were like 6. Cody asks her, you want to go in the military? And Mariah says, yes. I can't imagine Mariah of today wanting to participate in war. But she wants to join the Navy at this point when she's 14 because she wants to be a doctor. She says there's a Navy school in Maryland and they will for free teach her to be a doctor if she joins the Navy. And Cody asks if she's referring to the Naval Academy, and she says yes, Annapolis. But I did a little research. I don't think she particularly means Annapolis. I think she means the Uniformed Services University, where she would ultimately trained to be a doctor. Cody says the Naval Academy is the sharpest of the sharp. He says the Naval Academy will require something more than a GED. And Cody's right about that. Cody tells Mariah he thinks she could do it, but only if she goes to public school. He's right. I did research this, and without a high school diploma and really being the best of the best and the top in your class academically, you can't get into the Naval Academy from what I read. But I may be wrong. I'm not an expert in this. Cody says he thinks she needs a recommendation from her governor to get in as well. And Mariah asks how she can get one from her governor. Cody explains that there's a chance because Mariah comes from a polygamous family and he refers to Mariah as a plig kid, she might not get the recommendation from her governor. Cody is very encouraging to Mariah, and I have to give him credit for this. He believes Mariah can do it, that she's smart enough and stubborn enough, and he tells Mariah that he's proud of that. And he starts almost tearing up, and he thinks it's really cool that she wants to do this. Where is this Cody now, who can so heartlessly tell Janelle to kick her sons out? It's almost like a different person as the show progresses. I wonder if the old Cody is still in there somewhere and where he is. A lot of the older kids don't even talk to Cody, and he seems to have a lot of anger and resentment and such a focus on what he considers to be respect and obedience and being the supreme leader that he has lost himself and the good parts of himself. And he's just all toxic now. And I don't know what causes his toxicity. If it's his want to be with Robin in monogamy, his disillusion with his faith, his ego growing, or something else. Is this Cody, who is in tears, proud of his daughter, still there? Because the Cody of now said his wives are an obstacle to his goals. It's very toxic, and I don't know what makes a person behave in such a toxic manner. Cody wants Mariah to investigate this more, and he says the military is a big commitment, like marriage, and he is very pleased with her. And he hugs Mariah, and he tells Mary he thought the secret would be that she would tell him that she's pregnant. Mary is doing her hair because it's she and Cody's 20th wedding anniversary, so he's just taking her out to the world-famous Lakai, where Aspen and Mitch got married. And I was looking at info on Lakai just out of curiosity, and there's a true crime twist. There was a Christmas night murder-suicide of the founders and owners of Lakai. There's also an affair involved, included by a partner, and a lengthy lawsuit by a business partner with a $4.7 million settlement, and they had to put Lakai up for sale. And the owners planned the murder-suicide, and they told their family they wouldn't be coming home and not to have a service for them. It's insane, with a ton of plot twists. I'm into true crime documentaries and cases and series, and I'm not doing a true crime channel because I don't feel that it's ethical for me at all to profit in any way off of tragedy or make a spectacle of it. But maybe I'll go over this case since I'm not monetized at this point, and I find this very, very interesting. Who knew Lakai was surrounded by murder and million-dollar lawsuits and lurid affairs? It's very, very interesting. I'll probably do a bonus episode on it just for fun. There are a lot of bonus episodes. I'm planning the Lakai murder-suicide episode possibly with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And there's also going to be the Becoming Sister Wives book club episodes, and also an episode on the basic elements of the FLDS and how polygamy is meant to be lived according to the faith, because I want to see how Cody holds up the faith ideal of polygamy. They may not all believe in the faith anymore, but that's how and why this Brown family started for Cody. So I want to understand more about that. Anyways, back to the show. Mary is getting decked out because Cody is taking her out to a place that she's never been before, to Lakai, to celebrate 20 years of marriage. Cody says 20 years is a landmark, so they want to do something special to celebrate the occasion. Cody says it's time to get ready, and he asks cameras if Mary is finally out of the bathroom. It's probably taking so long because Mary seems to be using the wrong kind of curling iron that is more like an old school straightening iron to make what are supposed to be big curls or waves in her hair. She has really fine hair, and I don't think it's going to hold, but she's trying. I have very, very, very curly hair, and when I was in my teens, I did all I could to have stick straight hair, and now I love it long and curly. It perfectly suits my personality and my hippie ways, but I know all about straighteners and curling iron and flat irons from my youth. I loathe that stuff now 100%. I love leaving my hair curly, and it's so bad for your hair to apply heat often. But anyways, I just know from experience with Mary's type of hair, she's using the wrong type of curling iron if she wants to give her hair more volume and effect. She could do it much more quickly with a different styling tool. Anyways, Cody explains there's a restaurant, Lakai, that is very fancy, and in Utah, it's well known. You mention Lakai and people gasp because it's so high end. Mariah has stepped in to help Mary with her hair, thankfully. Mary says Mariah is an accomplishment of she and Cody's 20 years together. Mary explains again how she always expected to have a bunch of kids and that didn't happen. She has Mariah and Mariah's great. She's awesome. Mary says they've had 20 years doing everything they could do to try to have more kids together. It took them 5 years to have Mariah, and after that they tried and tried and tried. It's good to know at some point she was getting lots of intimacy from her husband because according to this season's tell-all, the sex stopped at least 10 years ago. Everything physically and fertility-wise is completely normal with both of them, so it's not a fertility issue. The doctors Mary has seen said that she has something called unexplained infertility. Cody comes in and he tells Mary to kiss him, and she asks, "Kiss you?" And he asks, "Kiss me again." And she asks, "Like right now?" He says it's our anniversary. It's as if Mary doesn't normally kiss Cody at all, as if it's unusual for them to kiss. But maybe Mary just doesn't like PDA on camera, I don't know. Cody then kisses her, and he says he's got the passports out for their anniversary trip to Mexico, and Mary is looking very forward to that. She smiles so big after the kiss, like she never gets any affection at all. And it's sad because I haven't seen Mary smile like that from the heart genuinely beaming for many, many, many years and many, many seasons on camera. I also feel like I'm in the upside down watching Cody be affectionate with Mary because we know how things are now. And for the 30th wedding anniversary, in contrast, they ate takeout picnic style at the Prairie Dog Playground on Coyote Pass as Cody bitched about how hard it was pleasing his wives. He's rejected Mary's flirtations and he refuses to get next to her, to touch her, to kiss her, to do anything with her. Cody couldn't remember how many years they were even married. And she brought him his favorite Rice Krispie treats and asked how many there are because she made one Rice Krispie treat for every year of marriage and he didn't know. He got it wrong. It seemed very clear that Cody was doing this 30th anniversary, the one on the Prairie Dog Playground, for filming purposes, or just, it was like basically pure obligation. And he used it as a bitch fest to complain about his other wives and his life, basically. It's really sad to see the contrast. So Cody and Mary are going to dinner, and later on they're going to go on their anniversary trip to Mexico, and Mary is super excited about it. She says in every marriage there are ups and downs. Mary says she and Cody have had harder times recently. Adding Robin's courtship to their relationship has put an added strain on their relationship. So it's a really good time for them to spend time as a couple in Mexico. Cody is admiring himself in his suit, smiling in the mirror at himself, and he says Mary looks good, and she is so happy on cloud nine. I haven't seen Mary this happy, like, in forever. Cody fluffs his hair. He explains he uses stuff to make his hair grow because all his brothers are bald and he's not, but he's getting there, and he lifts his front wisps to show his receding hairline. He messes his hair up like a mad scientist, and he says he has no tricks. This is all he's got. Janelle says the 20 years for Mary and Cody is a milestone. She thinks it's something you reflect on, thinking, wow, we hit that. We hit 20 years. Christine says it happened so fast, and Robin interjects, it just kind of happened. She always has to pitch in just meaningless words while the other wives speak on the confessional scenes. Like, see me, see what I'm adding? When she just vaguely mirrors what the other wives says, she adds nothing of substance. She just mirrors the other wife's words. She interrupts their thoughts with zero substance and nothing to offer just to be seen. Christine continues her thoughts. She says, yes, we were around for all of it. We knew them for all of it. Christine says when they look back at pictures of Cody and Mary, they wonder what Mary saw in him. Janelle has been married for 17 years and Christine for 16 at this point. Robin says when she sees the longevity of each relationship, 20 years is awesome and it encourages her that this is stable. They get to Lakai in Cody's two-door Lexus and there's a duck or a goose in the road and Cody honked and he doesn't move, so Cody drives around and what a disobedient duck. Cody honked, it didn't move. Was this symbolic foreshadowing? Cody says relationships are complicated. He says Mary and he have 20 years and they struggle to connect sometimes. Cody asks what has happened in 20 years and Mary says a lot. Mary says she and Cody met Robin at a friend's house. She says there was just kind of a connection between she and Robin, and as they drove off, she told Cody maybe they should consider Robin and think about her. It stirs up a lot of emotions that Mary has had about her insecurities and her jealousies and her disconnect that she's had with Cody. She says she needed Cody to be able to acknowledge that and see that. I think Mary is blaming herself for what she perceives as her own weaknesses of insecurity and jealousy, and as that being the fault for the disconnect with Cody. And Cody probably blames Mary for her weakness and her insecurity and jealousy over Robin, causing the disconnect rather than validating Mary's emotions and acknowledging them and acknowledging that it's not Mary's fault. It's not some kind of fault that's in her or a weakness in her, that these are natural emotions and he understands his accountability in it and why she feels that way, and it's not her weakness or fault if she feels as she feels. Cody probably blames Mary for the disconnect rather than validating her emotions and acknowledging that it's not her fault or her weakness to feel some insecurity and jealousy with Robin coming into the family. If Cody didn't pick a favorite, even pre-marriage and engagement, and gush about his love for Robin constantly, about being her soulmate, and if he had kept equal time and gave the same level of presence and attunement with his wives as he did before Robin entered the picture, and if he gave equal time and Robin followed the same standards the rest of the wives did during courtship, Mary might feel less insecurity and jealousy. Cody has to be accountable for his part in causing this and exacerbating it, and he needs to validate how Mary is feeling and not use it as an excuse for the disconnect. I doubt that Cody validates any of his wives at all. Instead, he has different standards for Robin than the other wives, and he gushes every chance he gets about how in love he is with Robin. And it affects his time with the other wives. They get less time, they get unequal time, and they can sense, I'm sure, when he's with them, his level of investment and presence with them during their time, in contrast with his investment and presence with Robin. And my guess is Cody doesn't hesitate to mention his love for Robin. For example, like when Cody was lovesick crying on Christine's bed during her time with him because he was so far from Robin. And this was all while Christine was very pregnant and she had to be the one to console him on her night. So Cody is accountable and contributes to how Mary feels regarding Robin, and he is partially to blame for it as well, if not all the way to blame for it. And if he wants to be more connected, it's not on Mary to work through her insecurity and jealousy. It's on Cody to be less in your face with his love for Robin, less obvious about her being the favorite. He needs to give equal time to all his wives and be present and invested, and he needs to want to be there rather than just being there out of obligation and making that clear, and not being there out of his own genuine want to be there. It's just an obligation for him. The disconnect isn't Mary's fault. He also needs to not gush about another wife during another wife's time. Cody is the main issue. This polygamous lifestyle is unhealthy. It will always come with an unspoken hierarchy, jealousy, competition, insecurity, envy, comparison, and comparison is the thief of joy. But it would be less if Cody was a better husband and leader and more fair and empathetic to his wives. This is why I'm very interested to learn what the ideal way polygamy should be lived is under the faith. I want to know the faith standard for polygamy, because I want to understand if the way Cody lives polygamy is in accordance with how it should be lived according to the faith, which is how the whole Brown family began in the first place, and it's rarely mentioned and addressed on the show. The faith was why it started, and I'm curious, and I want to understand why, the why of it. They did this for faith reasons. I want to understand the faith. The waitress then brings out 3 chocolate-covered strawberries with a sparkling candle as a surprise for their anniversary. Mary says she doesn't think Cody understands her a lot or what she's going through, and she isn't saying she understands everything Cody is going through. She wants Cody to understand what she is going through. Mary says any monogamous marriage has ups and downs, just as any polygamous marriage has ups and downs. It's just what happens in marriage. Well, in polygamy, it's constant, daily jealousy, insecurity, competition, envy, and comparison. It probably feels like being cheated on all the time. You adjust some, but the constant suffering always remains, multiplied by the amount of wives, or if there's a courtship or a fiance. Plus, you get a fraction of the time and presence and communication and intimacy that you get with monogamy. If the husband is rocky with you, he doesn't have to be present and invest in fixing it with you. He can go to another wife that he's good with. It's constant discord, and the husband gets different lovers, and there will always be some wives he doesn't in his heart feel like going to, but he goes out of pure obligation like a chore. And I'm sure that wife feels it and senses it and sees that with a favorite wife, the husband's heart is in it all the way, and that he wants to be with that favorite wife, that he's invested with that favorite wife. The downs of polygamy are not the same as the downs of monogamy. It's far more complex all the time, not to mention the unspoken hierarchy depending on how each relationship between a man and wife is going. There are ups and downs in monogamous marriage, but the downs Mary is referring to don't necessarily equate to the downs in monogamy. In polygamy, the downs are much more significant, in my opinion. Mary says with everything going on with Robin coming into the family, there is distance there between she and Cody, and she wants Cody to acknowledge that she has jealousy issues, and if she were to be giving attention to another guy, she asks Cody how it would make him feel if she had a second husband or another guy that she was giving attention to. Cody responds that it's not something he's comfortable even imagining. He can't even try to put himself in Mary's shoes for a second. If he did that, he would then have to validate her and acknowledge the validity of her feelings and take accountability. So, of course, he won't go there. He says the vulgarity of the idea of Mary with two husbands or another lover sickens him. It seems wrong to God and nature, Cody says, and he understands that it seems hypocritical and he doesn't know how to get around it. So, Christine can endure being pregnant with Cody gushing about how in love he is with another woman, and each wife can endure him having sex with the different wives and battle the constant emotional soup they stew in for living in polygamy with a husband with multiple other wives, and they have to deal with it and accept it. And it's not against God to do that, and it's not against nature to do that because faith allows it. But Cody can't for a second imagine the situation reversed with his wife having another husband or lover. That's too vulgar. It sickens him, the depravity of it. He can't even imagine being in those shoes. But his wives have to endure it every day on a daily basis for the rest of their lives, and he can sit and gush about his love and be in their faces about Robin. With it, he can pick a favorite, he can spend unequal time, he can pick the favorite's wedding dress and change the courtship standards for the favorite wife. The other wives followed certain courtship standards, but Robin was able to follow different standards than the other wives. And now he basically lives in monogamy with Robin. He can say his wives are obstacles to his goals, but just for a moment to picture Mary with another second husband is too preposterous. He just can't, because then he'd have to validate her feelings and take some accountability for how his behaviors and actions contribute to magnifying the constant struggle and suffering for his wives. Cody is so gross. It's just disgusting. The vulgarity of him kissing his fiancée while his other wife's water just broke and going back for seconds sickens me. The vulgarity of Cody not attending his daughter's serious scoliosis operation that was life-threatening sickens me. And him not supporting Christine during that time sickens me. The vulgarity of Cody gushing and crying like a child because he was far away from his soulmate, having his pregnant wife console him, sickens me. Cody is sickening and vulgar as a man and as a husband. And what Mary did as far as trusting an internet stranger was foolish. And she could have put the kids and the rest of the family in serious danger had the catfish been more unhinged. And she should admit that she was leaving had the catfish been the man of her dreams. But also, Cody abandoned her as a husband and made her feel weak and insecure, as if she was to blame for the disconnect and for the lack of intimacy. They didn't have sex for at least 10 years, we found out this tell-all. I understand Mary wanting to be loved, and I understand that she wants a man who is present with her and who wants her and who is fully invested in her. She was foolish in how she went about trying to find love, and she doesn't admit she would have left, and I would have loved for her to do that. She could have left the family before pursuing love, and she could have been more careful as a known person with a somewhat famous. She could have been a little bit more careful in who she tried to connect with, and possibly not tried to connect with internet strangers. But I understand Mary wanting to be seen and heard and loved, and Cody twists the knife in and throws it in her face every chance he can. But just like she is accountable for being foolish with how she went about finding love, with who she trusted, the danger she could have brought to the family, and for not admitting that she would have left had the catfish been real, Cody is also responsible for abandoning Mary and deflecting the disconnect on her emotions and her insecurity and her jealousy. He refuses to validate and acknowledge and understand his wife's emotions, and he refuses to acknowledge his fault and accountability in the matter. Cody tells Mary that him answering her question of how he would feel if Mary had two husbands, there's no way for him to answer it, and there's no way for him to win. This is all about Cody's ego. If he admits he would feel jealousy, envy, insecurity, that he'd compare himself to her second husband all the time, he has to then take accountability for making the issue worse with his behaviors and actions. And he won't do that. So he's deflecting to vulgarity that he can't win, blah, blah, blah. Mary says, but she isn't trying to win. She isn't attempting to make Cody look bad or compete with him and win. She doesn't win if Cody admits he would feel as she feels, and Cody wouldn't lose by telling Mary he understands her feelings and that he contributes to it. Cody says the emotion of it isn't something he ever wants to deal with. He gets that, he says. And Mary asks, you get that? What do you get? And Cody starts saying it's a deep, then he stops and he says he feels like he's admitting that what he's doing is completely and totally unfair. He feels that if he goes and addresses that emotion in Mary, it's an unhealthy place to go. Mary explains to Cody it's there every day, and it's in my face, and it's in Janelle's face, and it's in Christine's face. She says it's something they've chosen, and it's something they're okay with, and it's something she knows will help her grow and be a better person. Mary continues, what she would like from Cody is the acknowledgement that, yeah, she does have these issues and feelings, and she wants some understanding and patience back from Cody. Cody responds that the idea that Mary is jealous and that she struggles with things, he understands that. Does he? Does he understand how his actions and behaviors magnify the struggles and suffering of his wives? How the different standards with Robin from the start make it worse, like the kissing before marriage, getting her a rental, throwing her a huge wedding different from the other wives, especially Janelle and Christine, picking Robin's wedding dress with her when he wanted nothing to do with the planning of the other wives' weddings, and they had basically quick, simple weddings. Robin also got a 10-day honeymoon. The other wives got a few night road trips for honeymoons. And Robin got a nanny. When Christine asked for help raising 7 kids at a time, Cody told her it was her problem. She signed up for this. But Robin has 3 adult kids at home, plus Cody and 2 little ones, and she gets a nanny to help. A viewer of mine brought to my attention that it's possible that the nanny might be a provided government aid for some type of learning disability or issue. And if that's the case and that's why she has a nanny, then that's different. But for right now, all we know for a fact is she has a nanny when Christine had more kids to look after, plus Janelle's, and she was overwhelmed, and she also did homeschooling, and she asked for help. And Cody told her she can't have any. She received no help. I don't think Cody gets that by throwing his love for Robin in everyone's faces and gushing openly, and having Robin also gush openly by calling Cody her soulmate and doing very insensitive BS, like smelling Cody's jacket McKelty was wearing and telling her, I miss your dad, when McKelty is definitely old enough to see the pain and suffering Robin has caused to Christine, her mom, that this magnifies these constant negative emotions and suffering times 10. Mary says she thinks there have been times when Cody hasn't seemed to understand, and there have been times where he's been impatient and told Mary, you chose this, you signed up for this. This is what we signed up for. Mary continues saying, unfortunately, at the same time, she still has those emotions and those feelings to deal with. I feel like Cody feels that the women signed up to live polygamy, and whatever suffering it causes them is their problem alone, and he has nothing to do with it. And I doubt Cody understands that his behavior and actions make the jealousy and the insecurity and all the suffering even worse. And he feels like it's not his problem, and then he blames the wives for their weakness of having these emotions that they struggle with as to why there's a disconnect between him and his wives. And he refuses to take any accountability or responsibility for it. Instead, he lays the fault on his wives being inept and being weak and being emotional. Anytime any wife complains about anything having to do with the lifestyle, he shuts it down and lets them know they signed up for this. Just because they signed up for it, it's not on them to solely alone deal with the emotions and the suffering that this lifestyle causes them. The husband has to be fair and understanding and acknowledge the suffering that his wives feel. And the husband has to do what they can in their behaviors and actions to minimize it rather than make it worse and contribute to further suffering like Cody does, in my opinion. It's amazing when Christine asked for help, saying she was overwhelmed with providing constant child care and homeschooling for her kids and for Janelle's kids, she asked for help. And Cody also told her she signed up for this. It's her problem. It's what she signed up for. Cody is the one at fault. He isn't holding his end of the bargain up. He's not being a decent husband or even just a decent man who respects his wives and women, in my opinion. A good man wouldn't deflect all the fault on his wives for their struggles with the lifestyle by blaming their suffering on their own insecurity and jealousy as their fault, saying that they signed on the dotted line, it's not his problem. He would ask what he can do to alleviate it, how he contributes to it, like the favoritism, the unequal time, less investment, less intimacy, less presence and communication with certain wives. He can acknowledge that and he can change his behaviors, but he refuses to evaluate and reflect on his behavior and how he treats his wives and how he contributes to the suffering being magnified. Cody responds to Mary, saying he told her she signed up for this, saying when they first met Robin, how she felt towards Robin and her excitement and enthusiasm about the idea of Robin joining the family was so affirmative. And then when the reality hit and Mary dealt with jealousies, it was a complete shock to Cody. He says it's not that he's not empathetic about her jealousy or that he's not understanding of her jealousy. It's that it surprises him because of the contradiction between the enthusiasm for this new person in their family versus the jealousy now for this new person in their family. He says based on Mary's enthusiasm, he was getting gung-ho about Robin, thinking Mary was rooting for him. And then Mary was like, wait, I don't want to see you kiss her. It's funny that Cody mentions kissing. I've mentioned this a billion times and I'm going to mention it again, but I feel it necessary to bring up each point as Cody does and says things because I like bringing facts and receipts and building an argument properly. Again, with the kissing in their family, the kissing is supposed to start at the marriage altar. It's the typical family etiquette. With Robin, he kissed her at the engagement, and we know that it upset Christine very much because in their family, every wife waited until the marriage altar out of etiquette because Cody is a married man to other women. But Robin got a different standard. Now Cody is mentioning Mary saying she doesn't want to see Cody kiss Robin. I don't think it's only a jealousy thing. I think because the standard for the other wives and for Robin are different and unequal and unfair, that's the issue possibly as well. And when Cody gushes constantly along with Robin and then having to see them kiss in front of all the other wives and kids, it's probably very hurtful and it contributes to the suffering even more. It's not just jealousy. Cody exacerbates these things with his behavior. Robin as well. And also by giving Robin different standards to the other wives, there's a laundry list of different standards and levels of investment with Robin than the other wives. I'm sure Christine or Janelle would have loved to kiss Cody before the wedding day, and they refrained out of respect and etiquette because he's a married man till they married him. Robin got different standards, and Cody initiated that. He initiated that kiss, according to what Robin said. He also helped pick the wedding dress, and there were countless other things that Cody did much differently with Robin. I doubt what the wives signed up for under the faith was unequal time, unequal and different standards for one wife compared to the rest, Cody having a favorite wife, Cody's favoritism displayed on full display 24/7 and on and on. So when Cody says the wives signed up for this, no, this is nothing like what they signed up for. Cody says Mary wanted him to pursue Robin. And Cody asks Mary, why do this? Why stick it out 20 years in this relationship? And Mary says she gets a lot out of it. She gets a big family. She gets kids who love her. Mary says if she were to ever think of her family of 21 right now and pare it down to just a family of the three of them, that would just be so empty. Cody says he wants to say that he's sorry that in this process, heartbreak happens. He isn't sorry for not being more understanding or for not validating her feelings or for not taking accountability and responsibility for how his behaviors and actions make the suffering of his wives worse. No, he's sorry polygamy comes with heartbreak. It's part of the faith. The fault is not his at all in any respect. Cody tells Mary he hopes she knows he's devoted to her, that he'll love her. And then he stops and he says, how do I describe, what words can I tell or use to talk about our love and how deeply I feel for you and how important you are to me? Toxic, one-sided, manipulative, neglectful, abusive, cruel. Would those words work? If Cody deeply loved Mary at all, even once, He would not still twist the knife every chance he gets with Mary and be so openly cruel intentionally. He doesn't even seem to give Mary basic respect and the value she deserves as the mother of his daughter. I understand his ego was hurt, but he'd be able to see how his abandonment of Mary led to her behavior of seeking out relationships if he at all loved her or cared for her at any point. I really think Mary won't leave Cody even though they have zero relationship now, and even though she is financially independent and successful, because Mary fears just being her alone, her life just being her alone, her daughter is grown, and her identity is being part of a family. If she leaves, she might fear being alone forever or not being allowed in for family events or losing her whole identity if she loses the family and completely losing what little relationship she has with Robin and Robin's youngest kids if she were to leave the family. That may be all she has. If she leaves, she may fear being excommunicated from the family. Cody and Mary go on their 20th anniversary trip to Mexico. Robin's face, as Christine discusses this, she looks completely displeased and pissed and worried about what Christine is going to say because she knows that she is a factor in the reason that Mary and Cody's relationship is off. Christine says that she is really glad to see Cody and Mary go on this anniversary trip to Mexico because their relationship isn't so good right now, and they have both been a little off. In the polygamous lifestyle, Christine explains, because there are so many women and just one husband, things like anniversaries are more important and birthdays are more important than in a monogamous relationship. Christine thinks if it was just a monogamous couple, you wouldn't necessarily need to take a trip to commemorate an anniversary, but because there are so many different relationships, the alone time and the bonding is key. And there's a home video of Mary and Cody happy and blissful and loving on their trip to Mexico. And Cody says Mexico was made by God, and they kiss, and it looks like they're drinking mixed drinks that would typically be alcoholic, like pina coladas, but they could be virgin. I don't want to assume. Cody has an idea for a 20th anniversary present. Cody thinks they should go ahead and do IVF, in vitro fertilization. Mary responds, "Want me to tell you how I really feel about that?" She doesn't see the point in trying IVF. And Cody asks if Mary's sure, and she nods yes. Mary explains that when Cody asked her about doing IVF, she felt very guilty, and she knew she would break his heart by telling him how she felt about it and that she felt it was pointless and she didn't want to do it. Cody was surprised when Mary said probably not to IVF. He says he was floored. He didn't know what to do. He was dumbfounded by her unwillingness to want to try. Cody would like another child with Mary, and they're getting to the point where it's almost too late. Mary explains that 3 years ago they had a second pregnancy out of the blue, and they were so ecstatic. It was a cool thing. And then 12 weeks later, they lost the pregnancy. Cody says that broke their hearts, and there was soul searching that came with that. I can't imagine how Mary felt wanting a house full of kids all her life and struggling to have Mariah after 5 years, and then unexpectedly to get pregnant and to feel your dream is coming true and to be on a high for 3 months and then to lose that pregnancy. I can't imagine just the way that she feels. And life is so cruel and so unfair sometimes. And the emotional pain of that must be so great. I do feel for Mary. Mary says it would be awesome to have another child if it happened naturally. That would be awesome. That would be great. It would be the most amazing thing. But she doesn't feel like forcing the issue with IVF. Cody says he hasn't been told no in a strong enough fashion yet. To actually think Mary's no to IVF actually means a firm no. Later on in the show, I don't know what season it's in, if it's later in season 1 or season 2, but Mary considers actually being open to trying IVF, and Cody shuts her down, and I found that to be particularly cruel. I really did. At this point, Mary said no, and Cody's saying he doesn't consider it a no, and yet when she decides that she wants to consider IVF and she's ready to try, Cody refuses, and he completely shuts her down. Cody is unbelievable, and he's incredibly cruel. In my opinion, he's like an emotional terrorist who amplifies the pain and suffering that already inherently comes with the polygamous lifestyle. I can't imagine being Mary or Janelle or Christine. I can't imagine being married to someone like this. Mary says, and this has aged like milk, even though Cody and I are in a polygamous relationship, we can live happily ever after too. Mary and Cody fly back, and Mariah greets them at the airport. Mariah runs and hugs her mom, and she says she's missed her. And Cody goes, all right. Did anybody miss me? It could be benign, just teasing, or was his ego a little irked that Mariah didn't run up to embrace him first and tell him that she missed him? It's clear that Mariah missed her mom the most at this point. Mariah then hugs Cody, and Cody keeps saying, "Nobody missed me." And then Mary reassures him that Mariah did miss him. And Mary is crying in tears, happy to reunite with Mariah. It's interesting to remember how close Mary and Mariah were, and how the catfish incident and Mariah coming out and Mary's reaction to Mariah coming out really changed their relationship drastically. I think it's really sad. That does it for this week's commentary on Sister Wives. Next week, I'll cover season 1, episode 6, entitled A Fourth Wife to Be. Thanks so much for listening. Please like, comment, and if you don't mind, please subscribe, because I'd really love to get a community tab so I can interact more with you guys and ask you about your preferences, maybe take some polls. And apparently, unfortunately, I need a certain number of subscribers to be able to get the community tab to do what I would like to do. I love all of your comments and insights. Please let me know your thoughts down below in the comment box. I love the dialogue. I love interacting with all of you and all the different perspectives that you guys bring to the table. For my podcast audience, if you want to join the conversation, please head over to my YouTube channel, Sister Wives with Mary Jane K, or 90 Day with Mary Jane K, to join the conversation. I look forward to everyone's thoughts and opinions. Thanks, guys. See you next week. Bye.